because one of the primary components, which Zelensky has already previewed on his plan, is to have all the constraints on the long-range missiles removed so that he can strike deep into Russia. From a military perspective, for the moment, let's take off the table any consideration of what Russia may do as a response and just look at if Russia did nothing. Let's say, for example, that Putin was actually bluffing. He really was, and he's not going to do anything to NATO. Would these missiles change the dynamic of the war?
No, of course not. That's the whole point. Could we find other storage points similar to the one that was destroyed in Tver? I suppose so. But that's not going to fundamentally reverse the situation. It's not going to change a damn thing. In fact, if anything, it's going to provoke not only the response I talked about earlier with hypersonic missiles, but I think the Russians will realize that there's no end in sight unless they march all the way to the Polish border. And there are open discussions about doing that. They have the plans for it, and they do have the military personnel necessary to accomplish that. If that's what we want, if we want to see Russian armies back on Poland's borders, then by all means continue down this road, because that's where we're headed.
But now here's the interesting thing to me as to why we're even contemplating this. What you just said, there should be self-evident to anyone with an honest evaluation of the factors involved. But you had Secretary of Defense Austin actually come out and was asked about these given these long-range weapons. And he said, well, actually, you know what? There really aren't enough of them, even for the British and the French missiles, to sustain a campaign, which would be necessary to have any kind of operational impact at the front lines. You would have to have a campaign that would be sustained. But he said that we could not supply enough of these munitions to seriously damage a wide range of targets. Then added on top of that, Sullivan the other day talked about, he was asked at a conference in Kiev just a few days ago. He was asked about this whole issue about providing long-range weapons. And he said, first of all, he said, a lot of the problem is not that we're withholding them, is that our capacity is low. Then he said this, which was very, very illuminating about interceptor missiles.
Ukraine was running short of air defense interceptors. So I sat down with my team and I said, where are we sending Patriot missiles and Amram missiles around the world in the next 12 months? And I was told there's a whole list of countries we're sending them to. And I said, take every single one of those missiles, every one, and send them to Ukraine. That was not an easy thing to do. It required us to get our allies and partners to come along. Frankly, it required our bureaucracy to come along. And we are currently working on a substantial package, pulling together a range of different capabilities that we are going to try to get out the door before the end of this month.
Doug, we don't have enough ATACMS missiles. We don't have enough. We don't have enough of the interceptors. We can't build them fast enough. I mean, and you don't even get started on 155 millimeter rounds and probably in other categories of things. But the stuff that you really need to sustain a war, we don't even have it anymore. So why then would anyone even want to contemplate continuing a war which we can't even support?
One of Israel's greatest military commanders, a man named Doron Almog, has said repeatedly, you can do whatever you want with long-range strike weapons, but if you lose the close fight, you're finished. So the close fight is lost, and there's no way to win the close fight. So shooting missiles over the heads of collapsing fronts, retreating forces is going to change a thing. It's almost similar to the V-2 rocket campaign at the end of the Second World War. They weren't very accurate, and they were launching them at cities, and of course Hitler was told, no, launch them at ports, at harbors, launch them at aerodromes and so forth. But it wasn't there. They didn't have that capability. So this is foolish nonsense. The second point is, I think this is very important because we've touched on this in the past. We have no surge capability in the United States in terms of our scientific industrial base that supports the armed forces. Every time the Patriot engages, it fires 3 missiles at every incoming target. Well, at that rate, you're going to exhaust the missiles that you have in your magazine very, very quickly. And that's what's happened. We can't build them quick enough in order to make a difference. So we don't have the munitions. The same thing is true for AMRAAMs. Those are critical to supply NASAMS, which are really designed to shoot down low-flying cruise missiles, helicopters, and so forth. So the combination is hopeless. And I think Lloyd Austin was, thankfully, being honest. We can't supply them in great enough numbers quickly enough to make a difference. And we should be concerned at this stage about the fragility of our own capabilities, Dan. What if we suddenly had to fight a real enemy, like a real capable opponent like the Russians or the Iranians or the Chinese? And there are others out there. I mean, I've really grown tired and fatigued by this attitude in Washington that everyone outside of North America and Europe is somehow or another backward and incapable. This is not true. Capabilities that we monopolized 30, 40 years ago are now proliferating widely. So we need to get out of this mindset, but we don't seem to want to. And I think whoever ends up becoming the next president, whoever takes over, is going to find that not only have we spent ourselves into bankruptcy, but we've also exhausted our military capabilities to a very dangerously low level.